Yeah, Art Blakey
Yeah.
and the Jazz Messengers from 1963 with
Uh-huh.
Freddie Hubbard, Wayne Shorter, Reggie Workman, Cedar Walton, and Art Blakey. And my guest today was also a jazz messenger. I want to say hello to Bill Pierce. Hey, Bill.
Hey, how you doing? What's going
All
on?
right. Good to
Good.
have you here, Bill. When did you join Art Blakey and how did you get with the band?
I got the call in December of 1979. I was told that, well, look, it's going to be an opening in the band. We'll call you and you can come down and you can rehearse with the band and, I can let you know whether or not, he wants to use you or not, or words to that effect. And yeah, it was December 1979, and I did my first gig probably at McKell's in 1980 in January. So I went down and did a rehearsal. It was a pretty memorable rehearsal. Number one, because Art didn't show up; he didn't come to the rehearsal, and then there was a monkey also in the rehearsal too, an actual monkey. Art Jr. had a monkey, and we rehearsed at Art Jr.'s crib. I forgot where it was, somewhere in Midtown. And there was a monkey running around in there while we were rehearsing, and the monkey kept looking at me because I guess, he didn't recognize me. So I kept saying, "Hey, could you do something about the monkey?" It was pretty wild. So that's how I started out with Art Blakey. A rehearsal without Art Blakey, but a damn monkey.
Yeah, well, that was a pretty memorable band. I saw that band at McKell's, and that was
Yeah.
the band that kind of introduced Wynton Marsalis to the world. You also had Bobby Watson. Excuse me. Was James Williams the pianist at that point?
Franklin was a pianist. He was instrumental in getting me that shot at the gig. So it was James. It was actually James, Dennis. Dennis. What's Dennis' last name?
Dennis Irvin?
Dennis Irvin. Bobby. Valerie Ponomareff, and Art. Yeah, that was the band. So when I got there, Valerie was still there. Dennis was there just for a very short time, and then he eventually left. Maybe that was the only gig. Maybe we did one gig. I did one gig with Dennis. I think when Snitter left, I guess Snitter and Dennis decided, yes, we've been here for a while, and maybe we should do something else, whatever. And yes, and then I started doing it at McCall's. My once I got the word about a possibility of the gig, I was always saying, well, the two places I'd want to play is New York or Boston, and the first gig was in New York, the second gig was in Boston. I wanted to learn the music first, and get more comfortable before I played in my hometown or in New York City, but it didn't work out that way.
So was that the first time you met Wynton when he joined the band?
Yeah, a little later on, yeah, I'd been hearing about him. James had been telling me about this little young trumpet player who could really play and was really exceptional. And I had kept thinking, man, that name sounds familiar to me. Not Wynton so much, but the Marsalis name. I realized that later on that I had this album with his father on it, with Cannonball Adderley. But I knew something was very familiar about the name. And I actually, his brother was in my class too. That was a part of it too. That's right. I knew Branford. Branford was in one of my lecture courses at Berklee. That same semester, that was my last semester before I left the school for 3 or 4 years. And Branford was in the class, but I didn't really put all these things together, But because Branford never said anything about Wynton, and Branford was very talented too, well, obviously. But yeah. So anyway, so I started hearing about this great trumpet player. I heard from James and from Akira Tana, the drummer, who told me about Wynton.
And how does it go when you join Art Blakey? There's a book. Did you know the book? Do you learn the book? How does that work with the repertoire?
You start trying to learn it right away before you do the first gig. You try to know the music because Art didn't believe in having music on the bandstand. He would let you slide a little bit, maybe for a week or two, but after then you were responsible for knowing the music. So I was learning stuff because James had told me that he was going to try to see if I could, he could get me a shot with the band. So and some things I already knew, at least I thought I knew. But it's not like the same of actually playing with Art. Number one, playing with Art is different than playing with any other drummer, and playing the music as the band played it, because each edition of the Messengers played the music differently, somewhat slightly differently, and every band has personality. So, but you were held responsible for learning the music. That was an individual thing you had to do.
And so once the personnel became Wynton and Bobby and James, how long did it take you? I guess you were working a lot back then. How long did it really take for the band to coalesce?
Didn't take very long. I mean, because Art was basically working every weekend. If it was only 2 or 3 nights a weekend, locales uptown, we were doing that. But we were working pretty much every week somewhere. And so when I joined the band, like I said, it was a slightly different band. I got used to being in the band. So when you're in the nucleus of the band, and the nucleus of the band doesn't change, the rhythm section, the new person that comes in is it's a shorter moment of time, because everything is already set, and it's up to that individual to kind of blend with us, or for us to make whatever adjustments we have to make for that person. So and Wynton was a very astute musician on all aspects, and ensemble playing was one of the things. New Orleans, that's all about ensemble playing anyway. But one of the main things about it is also the ensemble playing. So, but Wynton kind of brought another level of, well, man, we got to, where we play this music and interpret this music. He had his own ideas, and it was, it was good. But every band does that, and every band interprets. Everybody plays moaning slightly different, or blues march even, but definitely moaning, everybody plays slightly different. So each band has a personality, but if you do enough gigs, eventually, if you're not doing it correctly, somebody's going to tell you about it, and you don't want it to be Art. You want it to be somebody other than Art, but Art will tell you as well. He would have told you. If you were not really, coming up to what he wanted, he would pull you to the side, and he was cool. He wouldn't embarrass you in front of people. He'd call you to the side, then curse you out privately, But he was always trying to give people tips, about what he thought in our own playing that we could do better, especially ballads.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Art Blakey as a leader and as a drummer behind you, what was that like?
Well, it wasn't any real significant difference. Because Art, without a doubt, knew what he wanted and knew what he expected. There was always a straw boss in the band who was like the musical director. Bobby, I think, was more or less it, but kind of was shared between he and James, but eventually became Bobby for the most part. But Art was the first time I had really played with a band, where the drummer was the leader, but, it wasn't, nothing changed. You knew what he wanted, and Art could tell you what to do or what you weren't doing by the way he played. He would tell you when you're playing, when you played enough now, you need to stop. You've done enough, or you've done too much. You would get a sense of it. He would let you know. It wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, there's a story about Miles and Coltrane when, Coltrane would just go on and he'd play these solos that went on and on. And Miles, like, at one point said to him, why don't you just stop? Coltrane says, I just don't know where to stop. And Miles said, take the horn out your mouth.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know that story. And Art was kind of like that, but he would play things right now. Or what would happen to the intensity behind your solo would drop, and you'd be out there kind of like on your own without anyone kind of sustaining you or supporting you. So you would realize, I must have played too long, so I will stop as soon as I can get out of this. I'm out of it. And then Art would always just have band meetings, and he would just kind of curse everybody out and tell you what you weren't doing. He did that pretty regularly. I think that was just a part of his methodology for getting the most out of us. He wouldn't, he didn't lay into us all the time. He was quite supportive, but sometimes he would curse you out pretty well, and tell you what he thought what you weren't doing. And he was he was quite a diplomat and quite a person who knew how to manipulate people. That's an understatement. And he just knew people. He had been around long enough. He had lived enough of a life uh, and survived enough as a person of his generation in this society. He knew how to survive, and he knew how to navigate through different people in different situations. And so when it came to running his band, he would let you know in a heartbeat, this is my band. Your name is not out there. So you shut up. You don't have anything to say. I mean, he was never quite that. Well, sometimes he would say things like that, but most of the times you just knew what a certain level of decorum should be in terms of how you interact with him. I mean, it wasn't formal at all. Art was, he was a very jovial and fun-loving guy, to say the very least. And you just learned. It didn't take long to kind of get a sense. I'll tell you one thing that he would do, though. Sometimes when he would cursing out the band or yelling at the whole band, he would look at not the person he was really directing his comments at. He would look at somebody else. So the first time there was a band meeting and he was really yelling at people, yelling at the whole band, he kept looking at me. And I kept saying, well, what did I do? I didn't do anything. And I was really like, oh, man, I didn't realize I messed up that bad. And then afterwards, I think I asked James, I said, man, what did I? He says, oh, that's just one Art's thing, man. He never look at the person he's really directing his comments at. So it was kind of funny. I said, wow, really? He said, yeah. And that's why I saw him do it again before to other people. Yeah.
I saw after the band with the personnel that I mentioned with you and Bobby and James, I guess a couple of years after that, I'm not sure when, there was going to be a change in the trumpet section.
Uh-huh.
And I was at the bottom line in New York, and Wynton was playing, and then Terence Blanchard came to the stage, and Wallace Roney came to the stage. Is that what happened when he replaced someone? He would bring people from same instrument? How did that work?
Yeah, that kind of became one of the things he did. He didn't always do it that way. There was many different methodologies that was used for replacing people. But during that time, he was always inviting guys to come to New York. So, and guys, we'd be in the middle of nowhere and he said, you got to come to New York. And people would show up and they would come in to set in. And sometimes he was in a good mood. He would let them play. So sometimes there was no job opportunities. They just showed up and he would let them play. Sometimes they'd come all the way to New York and say, Art, I'm here. And he'd look at him and say, so what? Well, I don't care. But during the time I was in the band, a lot of times we just had a lot of guys sitting in because somebody, yeah, man, so-and-so someone wants to play, man, is that cool? And I said, yeah, because I think he would check out guys to see, in his mind, maybe down the line. I mean, I remember Kenny Garrett used to sit in. Wallace used to sit in. There was a guy from St. Louis who used to sit in quite a bit. There were times when some of the old messengers would show up and they would play. So, yeah, it was always a continuing thing. And Freddie used to play a lot. Well, not a lot, but a few times he would sit in. Sometimes on festivals just as a part of the show or whatever you want to call it. And sometimes he would just show up. I remember Stanley Clark came and sat in with us once. I mean, anybody who ever played with Art would always have an open seat for them to come in and play. If you want to play, yeah, come on up and jam with them, play Blues March or play whatever. Maybe not one of the newer songs, but one of the old classics in the band. So it was always an open door for anybody. Once you're a jazz messenger, you're always a jazz messenger. And we relate to one another in that matter. If you're a jazz messenger, you relate to other jazz messengers in that particular way. We are jazz messengers.
Yeah, now we got a question here from one of our viewers. He says, a man who identifies himself as Open Song, he says, Art was a very driving, intense drummer. What was it like playing a solo with him behind you?
Oh, it was like being in front of a train. Sometimes like a train, and you were in another train, so you're kind of pushing on. Sometimes it was a train that was overtaking you. Like there were some nights when Art was particularly joyful or whatever you want to call it, and he would say, "Look out!" He would tell us ahead of time, "I'm coming tonight," and you would realize that he felt good. He had a new girl. He had a new love. Whatever the reason could have been, and he would play. I mean, there were some nights when he played beyond his normal level, which was pretty at the highest. But there were nights when he played above what you expected to hear from him or expected to get from him. Sometimes it was all you can do to kind of to keep up with art. And a lot of times you couldn't. He would bury you, so you would have to find devices and mechanisms and ways of either hanging there with him or getting out gracefully. But yeah, that was a part of the thing. He never played less than 100%. Sometimes he played 200%. I mean, I know that's not factual, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little about Art Blakey, the man. You were on the road. When you're on the road with someone, you tend to learn a lot about them. He had already had a lifetime in jazz. He was on the road, since the bebop era. What do you think you got from Art, from just life on the road and being a musician in general?
Oh, really just about how to handle yourself, how to respect the music. Number one is how to respect the music. And they thought of those guys of that generation, and Art in particular, they really thought of the bandstand as sacred. So as crazy as it can be and as wild as it might seem, there's a certain level, or there's a certain decorum that must follow. You don't disrespect the band leader, or you don't respect the band or the bandstand. And there was a phrase that I forget sometimes about when everybody's playing at their best and the band is at its best, called lifting the bandstand. It was a thing you want to play to the extent that the bandstand came up off the ground. I mean, to that level of intensity and passion about playing. And that was a terminology that Art would use from time to time about lifting the bandstand. And they really respected the music. I mean, there were certain things. I mean, it could be kind of loose with Art, but there was the music in the bandstand was it was to be respected and revered. But in the context of Art Blakey and the Messengers, or jazz musicians in general, it wasn't like the symphony, of course, but we had our own decorum and our own mores and ways of expressing that and demonstrating that type of respect. But you had to respect Art. Well, Art would not tolerate you not respecting him, because he would stop playing and get up and punch you. So it's well, no, you didn't do stuff like that to Art, and a lot of other guys. It wasn't just Art either.
Yeah. Okay, we got a question here from Chet Jason Perry. I didn't mention, but Bill played with Stevie Wonder for a while. And Chet asked, how was it playing touring with Stevie compared to a straight-ahead gig?
Well, I mean, I'm only laughing because, with a band like Art Blakey and Tony Williams and Freddie Hubbard, the artistic freedom to create within the parameters of what the band leader wants and expects is immense. And with Stevie Wonder, it's another kind of aesthetic that you would play the music as it should be done, but with the same spirit and the same level of joy, hopefully, and the same professionalism. When you were Stevie, essentially, we were backup artists for Stevie, and there's nothing wrong with that, and we were honored to do that. But with Art Blakey, it was a little more interactive, where sometimes you could be the star if you had a good enough night. And with backing up Motown acts at that time, and Stevie was more Motown than Stevie at that point. And by that, I mean, he was still a part of the whole system of Motown, where they had a musical director and we had charts that we read. And it was really a show based around Stevie. And that's what it was supposed to be. It was one of the great experiences for me to learn how to be a professional and have that kind of the pressure that at least that I used to put on myself, to make sure that I didn't mess up. I didn't embarrass myself, and certainly not embarrass the leader or the band or the organization. So it was a great experience for me. And Stevie was a really nice young man. He was about 20 years old then. He turned 21, I think, when I was in the band, but I may be wrong. But he was he was 20 or 21, and he was trying to really extract himself from Motown at the time. But didn't quite work out that way. But it was great being with him. I mean, it was a nice band. We had a lot of really great guys in the band. It was a really good. It was like a family, like most bands should be. All the bands I've been a part of have always been really, for the most part, really a bunch of people that got along really well with one another. That's not always the case in bands.
Now, we opened the show with Freddie Hubbard playing in the band. You worked with Freddie when he was a leader after you were with Blakey, right?
Yeah, when I left Blakey, within the year, Freddie had asked me to play with him. I mean, he sort of made a comment about it when I was at a place called Lush Life in the Village. So I had just left art, and I ran into him and his manager, a woman named Marianne Topper, who I knew from Boston. Yeah, and and he just said, "Yeah, I heard you left Boo, huh?" He said, "Yeah, I may give you a call." Just sort of said, "Sure, right, yeah, okay," and that was cool. And then he did. He called me, and I played with him for about 2 years off and on. He had a West Coast and an East Coast band. I was an East Coast band, and he had another band. Guys were saving money, so if he had gigs on the West Coast, he didn't have to fly him all the way out there. He would have a West Coast band to do the gigs on that side of the not the Continental Divide, I guess, and then you had the East Coast band. So, and that was a great experience playing with Freddie, who was another just phenomenal musician. I don't think there's another Freddie Hubbard in the world. He was very singular in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the trumpet, he has few equals. Unfortunately, Freddie left us a little too young, but his
Yeah, but
music certainly stands the test of time. That trumpet playing is just incredible.
for sure,
I
man. And
got another question from the audience here.
Yeah.
Did Wynton help, or was it old school competitive?
No, Wynton helped a lot. I mean, Wynton had, he was younger, so he had slightly different, but essentially Wynton was about the music. I mean, more than anything, that's what he was about. And that's when he kind of started giving us, hey man, you guys ain't really playing it, this correctly. But it was never about ego or anything like that. It was about making the music correct. So everything that Wynton brought made the music better, or not better. That's not the right word. It just made it more relative to what Wynton heard, and the trumpet player generally, whether he's the straw boss or not, that's who's the leader, the lead voice in the band, because that's how the music is played and how the music is written. So it was pretty much, yeah, it was just what he brought. He brought something to the band that hadn't been there, if only his personality and his expertise. And not to say that to differentiate him from any other trumpet player, but what Wynton is and what Wynton has, he brought that, and that made us different or better. I don't know. I won't say better. It made us different. It made us, what that band sounded like.
Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about Tony Williams and look at some video of Tony's band when Bill was with them. But before that, let's talk about your teaching thing. When did you start to teach at Berklee? You just retired a few years ago as head of the woodwind department. So I guess you were there like 25 years, something like that?
Well, a little bit more than that, man. I started teaching at Berklee around the time I'd say I started teaching at Berklee at like 1971, maybe. And I was a part-time teacher with very few hours. So I taught. Let's see, I take that back. I'm getting old, getting a little senile. 75 is when I started teaching at Berklee. So in 1975, I decided, well, because I had done a lot of shows. I'd done vaudeville shows. Hello? I have no idea.
Where's it coming from? Oh,
I don't
hold
know.
on.
I didn't touch anything.
Where's that coming from? Oh, we got
Okay.
a mysterious visitor there. Okay.
So, do you hear me now?
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, it's a double. It's like a recording.
I don't know what's going on here. We got a mysterious visitor here. We'll just continue. Let's go. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know how it got in there, but in any event, let's go back to Berklee. How did you get to Berklee? What was it like teaching there? How did it change over the years? What the hell is that coming from? I'm sorry, Bill. All right, I found the answer. Sorry about that. Greg Fontaine.
I played in something called the Roy Radin All American Vaudeville Review. It was just a gig that came up every now and then. So I mean, I was just trying to make a living so I could support myself and my wife. And I finally said, maybe I should check out Berklee since it's my alma mater. And I went there. I got a job, and as soon as I started teaching, I realized I got to do a little bit more work. I got to do a little bit more study. I have to figure out how to teach. I mean, just because you can do something doesn't mean you can teach it. And I had to learn how to teach, and I had to. And then, like I came from a family teacher, so teaching wasn't something I really wanted to do. As a matter of fact, it's something I really didn't want to do. But once I started teaching, I started realizing how much I had to teach myself how to teach and how to teach other people, how to be able to convey thoughts and ideas and methodologies to young people. I realized that, wow, this is really beneficial. I started being a little bit more cognizant of what I was trying to do in terms of music and as a musician. And it turned out to be a really good experience for me because I got to play a lot in those days. We played a lot at Berklee as teachers because we just did. We were doing concerts all the time. James Williams was still teaching then. That's how I met James. He was a Berklee teacher. So I got to meet him. I got to get a relationship with Gary Burton. So I would start doing some when they had teaching bands or bands of teachers traveling. I would be with Gary Burton and a guy named Larry Monroe. But it was a really good time for me to be there. And I learned a lot. I learned about as much as I taught. Maybe I learned a lot more than what I taught. And I met a lot of nice young people. I mean, some of the students I had are people I still count as friends now. I was only in my 20s myself. I was pretty young. So, I mean, yeah, it was great. And then it set myself up so when I did do the thing with art years after, I came back. But then I came back and I didn't demand it, but I requested if I was going to come back, I had to come back as a full-time teacher. So that was pretty good. So I had two stints at Berklee from 1975 through 79, and then from 72 until 2 years ago. So I was there a long time.
And over the course of your tenure, did you find the students changed?
Yeah, they changed a little bit. I mean, the world of music is different now, and even the world of jazz music is different now. Towards the end, I stopped teaching because I became an administrator. I just found students different, and they had different values, and their taste in music was maybe sometimes different than mine. But that didn't prevent me from having good relationships with people. But it was different in some ways I can't really describe, but they were really different. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of been a resurgence of students that are really gifted instrumentally. I mean, they can really play their instruments because they start so young, and which is good, but not always good in some ways. But it just made for a difference. It was just different as the digital age evolved. students changed.
Sorry about that.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but my experience at Berkeley has been generally very beneficial, and I learned a lot. It was really a good, very good thing for me to do. Excellent thing for me to do. I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm very thankful to the Burke family and the connections I made in the professional world as well as the educational world just by being a teacher and the students I met. The Javon Jacksons, the Antonio Harts, the Mark Grosses, the Melissa Aldanos, all these people I met, I wouldn't have known, I wouldn't have met them. And then going back to when I was a student, people like Steve Slagle and George Garzone, and I'm from both sides of it, being a student there and being a teacher there. A lot of these people are my friends and my collaborators and whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
My peer group. My peer group, I guess.
We're going to go to the Tony Williams segment here. Let's play a little Tony before we talk.
Okay, very good.
Wow.
Where was that from?
That's
That
from
was live, right?
Germany.
Yeah.
1989. We saw Wallace Roney on trumpet, Bill on sax, Milgram Miller on piano, and I believe it's Bob Hurst on bass.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Tony Williams. Wow, what a powerhouse behind you. What is it like with Tony Williams backing you? Because he could be overwhelming at times.
At times. Most times. It was unbelievable, man, because I was a super fan of Tony's. I was I'm a saxophone player, but I idolize Tony's ability to master his instrument and to basically play the instrument like he invented it himself. He played the drums like he invented the drums. And so I always had to sing about Tony's musicianship and not even knowing about his compositional efforts and stuff like that. So it was just a joy for me. And he could definitely be overpowering a lot of times, sometimes really overpowering. But it taught me something. I had to learn how to play with him, as we all did. We had to learn how to pick your spots and how to save your energy because he had so much energy all the time. And, it was just, it was a great experience for me. And that was a band that I don't think got enough accolades or just attention and gigs. That may have been beyond what I knew about the inner workings of how Tony managed his business. But I just thought that band could have been working a lot more than we did. I mean, and I was actually teaching at the time, so I was trying to juggle two things at the same. I was teaching at Berklee full time and playing with Tony, so I was kind of doing a lot of running back and forth. A lot of flights to Boston in the morning to teach, and then flights back to New York to do the gig. So yeah, it was kind of a pretty rough time for me. But I did all I could to make sure that I did the gig.
Well, the gigs that I heard. Oops, we've got a little focus issue here. The gigs that I heard were fantastic, man. Could you say a few words about a couple of guys who are no longer with us? First, Wallace Roney.
Well, I knew Wallace as a student at Berklee. And he was a really, really gifted individual. Man, the guy had a photographic memory. He had perfect pitch. He had his own way of playing the music, and he stuck to it. He never changed, no matter what other people may have said or maybe suggested to him. And he got to the point where everything he was always trying to perfect, he had perfected it. I think at the end of his musical life, or I don't know how many years I'm talking about, he had everything that sometimes it didn't seem like he was quite there. He was there. He was there and there all the way. So whatever the concept he had in his head and in his ear, he mastered and perfected it. Very similar to Woody Shaw in not the musicality part, but how they heard something in their own head that hadn't been done before, and then they did it. And I think a lot of people really don't hear everything with Wallace that there is to hear. He was a master musician, without a doubt.
Yeah, he was a fantastic player who unfortunately once again left us too soon. What about Mulgrew? How did you like playing with Mulgrew Miller?
Mulgrew was just, he was like, he was kind of a mixture of like the most down-home guy I ever grew up with in the little town I grew up in Florida, and the most sophisticated individual ever. Certainly musically, one of the more sophisticated thinkers and humans ever, because the way he saw the world and the way he wanted to be as an individual in the world was so well above other people. That's not a nice thing to say, but it was just so singular. I'll put it that way. It was just singular. He had no malice, no meanness, no negativeness or anything in his personality. And he was just a pianist of, astounding ability, and his skills and his interpretation of music was like nobody else, as far as I'm concerned. It was a real gift to play with Mulgrew and to know him. I knew him back when he was just basically trying to get it together, and he got it together.
Boy, you got it together big time.
Big time. Got it together.
Incredible player. We burned through an hour here. I don't know how it happened, but
I didn't even get
Bill Pierce is a man who has a lot to say. Perhaps he'll come back again. But before we do that, oops, a little bit out of focus here. Bill, what are you doing now? What are you working on now?
I'm actually playing a lot. We're actually playing a lot of Art Blakey's music in a band called the Legacy Band with Ralph Peterson. And so, and it's interesting to find out how that music still has legs. That music still sounds great. I mean, great music doesn't diminish because it's been around for a while. As a matter of fact, it may be the opposite. It may even get better, and may have more effect and more impact. And so by playing the Jazz Messengers legacy music, we've really discovered that, man, that music still has resonance with people. And now we're starting to put our own sort of songs into the concept. So we'll see what happens, but that's what I've been doing the most. And I've been playing with Kevin Eubanks for about between 15 and 20 years, and we've done some really great, well, we've had some great music and great recordings. A lot of them were not really out there in the public because it was through Kevin's own publishing and his own record company. But, you know, we've been together and through a lot of different bands. As a matter of fact, we had one of the bass players that used to play with Tony was in the first band, which was Sean Moffett. So, yeah. So, you know, the circle and the cycle of the way the music progresses and goes forward, still the same pretty much. But yeah, so those are the two things that I've been doing for the last year, and I've been with Kevin for about 16, 17 years. So still enjoying music, still playing as much as I can whenever, up until recent, it was pretty busy. Last year we were really busy. I was very busy, and I was very thankful to be that busy and to play that much because, you know, at my age, I kind of need some impetus. I need something to force me to practice and to get my ass up and take care of some business. So last year was it. This year, not quite the same, but hey, music is still going to always be with us, and hopefully, God willing, I'll be a practitioner on some level somewhere.
I want to thank Bill Pierce for joining us today on Jazz Video Guy Live. I'm going to do one more Tony Williamson to take us out here, but Monday our special guest will be Randy Brecker. So thank you, Bill, so much for being part of this. And to my friends out in the audience, please stay healthy and take care of each other.
Take care.